Hello and welcome back to Oddtober, the month of the year where we celebrate all things Oddworld. This time we're taking a look at all of the obscure games released in the series that probably don't quite have enough going on for me to cover them in their own individual videos. So think of this as a way of me wrapping up any loose ends, I suppose. Now, 3 of the most obscure Oddworld games are ones that I've actually already covered. In fact, they were the focus of last year's Oddtober, with these being the Game Boy Oddworld games, Oddworld Adventures, Oddworld Adventures 2, and the Game Boy Advance version of Oddworld Munch's Odyssey. Seeing as we've already dedicated entire videos to those games though, we're not going to be talking about them here, and rather we're going to be moving on to another one of Abe's portable adventures with Abe Speak for mobile devices. Abe Speak is potentially the single most obscure game ever released in the Oddworld franchise, and I wouldn't be surprised if many of you hadn't heard of this. It was developed by Just Add Water and released in 2012 for iOS and Android. Newer Apple devices unfortunately can't run this game due to it not having been updated since 2013, so if you want to play this the way it was intended, then the best option is going with the Android version, which you can still download from the Google Play Store. Annoyingly, I don't actually own any Android devices, so in order to play this game for myself, I had to emulate it, and after going through all of that, I found that it really wasn't worth the hassle. Basically, Abe Speak is what happens if you take the Game Speak tutorial from the PS1 Oddworld Abe's Odyssey, make Abe's model look really derpy for no real reason, and then call it a day. I mean, seriously, they could have at least taken the other characters that use Game Speak from Abe's Exodus and Munch's Odyssey and put them in here. That way at least this would have been the most content-heavy Game Speak menu that we've ever seen, but no, it's just Abe. You'd literally be better off just booting up Abe's Exodus and fiddling around with the Game Speak options there instead. I mean, the background music here is even ripped directly from Abe's Odyssey too. Everything about this just screams that it was rushed out. But why? It's not like anybody was even asking for this. I guess the intention was to just build up some brand awareness, and with the app being free, it was seen as a good way of doing that. I mean, to be fair, it's not like it's offensively bad or anything, but still. Now, to be fair, there is actually a little bit more going on with this, because there is actually an element of gameplay. There's this additional mode which basically acts as a memory game where Abe will perform a series of his trademark GameSpeak options, and you need to remember them and tap them back to him in the right order. When you get this right, you move on to the next level, which adds another thing to remember onto the previous chain. I have to say, I got extremely bored with this, but I was determined to actually finish a game, and I ended up doing pretty darn well if I do say so myself. If you really want to, why don't you see if you can beat my score? I'm normally really bad with this sort of thing, so I'm happy I did fairly well. Overall though, this is just really rubbish. It could have maybe been slightly better if it would have had more effort put into the character model, implemented all of the other creatures that use GameSpeak, like the Sligs, Paramites, Scrabs, Gluckens and Munch. And potentially it could have even have had some information about these different species too. With how it is now though, it's by far the worst Oddworld game that we've ever seen. So if we were to revisit the Oddworld series ranking from last Oddtober, this would be going right at the very bottom. The cherry on top is that when I went to look at the credits for the game, they moved so stupidly slow that I couldn't help but laugh. This is probably just a case of the game not running properly due to me emulating it, but I like to think that the developers were just so ashamed of this that they didn't want anyone to actually see their names appear. A feature that I didn't realise existed until I happened to read some of the reviews for the game on the App Store is that you can actually talk into the mic and Abe will repeat what you say and make your voice sound like a Madokan. This is actually a fun little gimmick, but there's 2 issues with it. First of all, why is this feature not advertised? The game doesn't make it apparent that you can even do this, and it only works on the title screen too. So the few people that actually downloaded this game probably wouldn't have even known about this. And then the second larger problem is that it straight up sucks. I mean, just listen to this and tell me that I sound anything like a Madokan.
Hello, this is MrPseudonymless, and you're watching a video all about obscure Oddworld games.
It's just so goddamn terrible. I do have to admit I kinda love it though because it's so bad. Again, what would have been interesting here is if it would have had more Oddworld characters and when you spoke to them it changed your voice in different ways. It's just a really underbaked game, and it's a shame because I do feel like with a bit more effort this could have been a fun little novelty at the time. Now though, let's move on to something that actually resembles a proper game, shall we? This next thing we're talking about isn't actually a full game, but I never spoke about this in any of the previous Oddtober marathons, so I figured I might as well talk about it here. Plus, I do get the impression that not many people have played this, and even fewer people have probably heard of it. So let's talk about Alfs Escape, the DLC pack released for Oddworld New and Tasty. The concept behind this DLC is that while rescuing Mudokons from Rupture Farms during the events of the standard game, there was this other area that Abe went to that we didn't actually see in the main game. And this is where we rescue Alf, one of the Mudokons featured in Abe's Exodus and Soulstorm. This is actually a really cool idea. I always did wonder which Mudokon Alf was in the original Abe's Odyssey, so now New and Tasty actually gives us an answer to this, which is pretty neat. The DLC itself feels exactly the same as New and Tasty, it's just like another fairly short level to go through if you find yourself wanting more. But what is a little bit interesting is that this is technically the first truly new Oddworld content that we had seen since Stranger's Wrath in 2004. Sure, we had HD remasters and New and Tasty itself, which is a remake, but Alfs Escape features completely new level designs, making it the first new Oddworld thing that we had seen in 11 years. Crazy stuff. The gimmick with this DLC pack is that you enter a fairly large level and have to reach the end to find Alf. In order to do that, you need to get past several reasonably difficult sections featuring slogs, slig possession, grenade throwing, and more. But then once you actually get to Alf, you need to guide him all the way back to the start of the level, going back through all of the obstacles you just went past, but with Alf following behind you. It's actually a really good idea, and there are some standout moments, like this bit where you and Alf are separated in the background and foreground, with you needing to do loads of platforming sections while a buzzsaw slowly creeps up on Alf in the background. There's also some really nice references hidden away in here too. Like obviously the fact you're rescuing Alf in the first place is a reference to Abe's Exodus and potentially foreshadowing Soulstorm. But when you find Alf, he's actually in a bar serving Soulstorm brew to the Sligs, referencing the fact that he'll later set up Alf's Rehab and Tea, where he instead helps Mudokons to overcome their brew addiction. And on top of that, there's not only some early concept art for Soulstorm Brew on the wall, kind of implying that he's serving an incomplete version of Soulstorm Brew because the real one hasn't been made yet, but also there's an albino Slig resting his head on the bar, this being a reference to the cancelled Oddworld game Sligstorm. Whether this is just a cheeky reference or whether the intention was to actually make Sligstorm as DLC for New and Tasty, we'll never know. But it's pretty cool seeing all of these Oddworld references in this one area like this. The major issue with Alfs Escape is that it's extremely short. I doubt that this would take you any longer than an hour, especially if you're already familiar with New and Tasty itself. This wouldn't be a problem if it was free, which weirdly it actually is on the Nintendo Switch. But on PS4, PC and Xbox One, it actually costs a bit of money. I don't really think that the content on offer here should cost any extra on top of the base game, but at least it is only a couple of pounds, so it's not really too much to complain about, I suppose. The other issue is that because Alfs Escape is based on New and Tasty, it is a little bit janky at times. The grenade throw-in just feels a bit stiff, and like it almost snaps into set positions rather than letting you smoothly aim. The ragdoll effects are really bad and create this effect where nothing feels like it has any weight. Plus, it just looks absolutely stupid seeing Abe and Sliggs getting stuck in platforms and just dangling there. Sometimes I feel like there were moments of bad design, like this section where you're supposed to possess a Slig and go through this area shooting everything in sight, but I didn't actually know I was supposed to possess a Slig at first, and I went through the section as Abe, which was really tough. And then at the end I came to an impossible area and couldn't backtrack to possess a Slig, meaning that I had to go through that entire area all over again. Maybe they should have put a Slig lock here to make it clear you needed a Slig or something. I also feel like the timed bombs just straight up don't work properly in New and Tasty. Like, if we enhance this image here, do I or do I not hit this bomb when it's green? I'll let the jury decide whether this should have killed me or not. Most of these things aren't flaws that are specific to Alfs Escape, and they're more so just problems carried over from New and Tasty. But it's still not good when you're playing such a short section of a game and encounter this many problems. Also, I do really think that it was a huge missed opportunity to not make this a two-player co-op experience instead. I know that would have required a lot more work, and I don't even know if the game would have been able to handle this, but in theory, a co-op Oddworld game where you play as Abe and Alf escaping from Rupture Farms together could have been incredible. If it had been fleshed out enough, I really wouldn't have minded paying for that, because it actually would have offered something that wasn't seen in the main game. It's not really fair to put Alfs Escape into the series ranking, because it's not actually its own game, it's an extension of New and Tasty, but if I had to put it somewhere, then I'd probably put it in 8th place. It's probably a bit better than Oddworld Adventures for the Game Boy, with them both being very short, but Alfs Escape having the edge due to it being on way better hardware. Oddworld Adventures 2 for the Game Boy Color is probably better though, because it's quite significantly more fleshed out than this, and feels like a full game. Maybe if Alfs Escape would have had cutscenes which made us care more about Alf and given him more of a character, I would have ranked it higher, but as it stands, it kinda just feels like it's a bit of a watered down version of something that could have been a lot better. The final thing we're talking about in this video, quite honestly, I feel very underqualified to even be bringing up. I do still want to mention it though, because it is an interesting part of the series. So, join me as we briefly talk about the Soulstorm ARG. For those of you that don't know what an ARG is, it stands for Alternate Reality Game. These are fairly often used as a type of viral marketing, and some of them have been extremely successful and incredibly complex. One of the biggest ones ever conceived was used to promote the 2008 film The Dark Knight, and it was called Why So Serious? Basically, the way that an ARG works is that it uses real-world objects, places, people, and concepts, and turns them into a big riddle that slowly gets solved by the combined efforts of a group of people. Normally this would be done by using the internet. Why So Serious started at San Diego Comic-Con, where a person was given a dollar bill that had been defaced and written on. They followed the instructions on the bill and were taken to a website that provided them with real-world coordinates, with instructions to meet there at 10 AM. After gathering a group of people together, they went to the spot and waited. They kept checking the website for updates when a mysterious message appeared. Look up. Almost unbelievably, a plane then flew by overhead and left behind a trail of writing which displayed a phone number. Calling this number led to the group unknowingly being recruited by the Joker, and led to even more ridiculous things happening. I mean, seriously, eventually this ARG progressed to the point where people were going into bakeries to buy cakes that had phones inside, giving them instructions on what to do next. If you've never heard of this before, it makes for a very interesting read, and has become one of the classic examples of what an ARG can be. But to get back on topic, the Soulstorm ARG could obviously be nothing like this. I'm sure Oddworld inhabitants have quite a bit of money, but nowhere near enough to do something on the scale of Why So Serious. So what's the alternative here? Well, you have the ARG take place entirely online instead. Things started with mysterious messages being found on the Soulstorm announcement website. After finding some HTML code hidden in different images on the teaser site, people were led to images and videos containing even more cryptic messages which had to be decoded using real-world code-breaking techniques like Caesar ciphers. Now it's at this point where things start going way over my head. People were having to translate lines of nonsense text by viewing them with UTF-8 web browsers, translating binary code, Morse code, Navajo code, and all of this ended up leading to Twitter accounts for Ed the Madocan and an account called the Spirit of 1029, which is run by the resistance group formed by the escapees of Rupture Farms after the events of Abe's Odyssey. It's all pretty cool stuff, and it got more and more complex as time went on. But eventually, it actually resulted in our first look at Oddworld Soulstorm with 4 teaser images. These images show Madokans being experimented on, possibly cataloguing the creation of Soulstorm brew and its effects on the Madokan species. It's actually quite creepy, and in general, this was some amazing promotion for the game. It did a lot to build up hype, and I was always interested in seeing the new discoveries people were making, even if I was far too inexperienced with this sort of thing to actually help myself. The sort of disappointing thing with this is that despite going on for 2 whole years, it seemingly kinda just stopped. There was no big revelation or anything at the end, and despite making a lot of discoveries throughout the game, there doesn't appear to have been any big payoff. There are still a few unsolved puzzles though, and of course there's always the potential that it'll become active again when a new game or DLC is revealed. But for now, it seems to have been completely halted, probably due to the fact that Soulstorm is obviously out now, so continuing a form of marketing for it seems a little bit pointless. With this not being an actual video game, once again I can't properly put this into the series ranking. Comparing this to something like Abe's Odyssey is impossible because it's a completely different medium we're talking about here. So I'm not even going to bother attempting to fit this in. It was very fun while it lasted though, and I imagine that the people who are actually involved with solving all of these mysteries were hugely invested in the experience. It's the sort of thing that can't really be replicated, and I think that's the beauty of these ARGs. Once they're done, they're done. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing because it's not like you can reset the progress and try something again. Once something's happened, things change in real time and you have to be there to witness it and become involved. But that wraps up the video. Unless I've missed some kind of ultra-obscure game that even I've never heard of, I believe that means that we've now covered every single Oddworld game apart from the big one. Oddworld Soulstorm. So join me next Friday when we'll finally be taking a look at that. For now though, give the video a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe to see more stuff like this coming soon, and leave a comment down below letting me know if you've even heard of any of the games in this video. And until next time, bye!